What if I told you the new Arendal 1528 Tower 8s could easily surpass the performance of many 5.1 home theater systems? In this video, I want to share my experience with the Tower 8s in a standard living room setup over the past few weeks. Now first, let's talk about the design. I love the curvature of the Tower 8s. Not only does it provide a very modern appeal, but it also has two main functional purposes. The first purpose is it allows each speaker to be acoustically time-aligned so that the sound from each driver hits your ears at the same time. The second thing is it allows the tweeter in the mid-range to be angled towards the primary listening position. When I first unboxed the towers, I was initially concerned that the tweeter in mid-range would be too high at a typical listening position. It wasn't until I took a closer look and realized that the top portion of the speaker is actually curved, and it allows the tweeter in the mid-range to be angled downward towards your listening position. Now, because of their height, Arendal does recommend sitting like a minimum of 8 feet or maybe 2.5 meters from the speakers. The most optimal position would be positioned at 13 feet or 4 meters from the speakers. Now, during my listening sessions, I'm about 12 feet from the speakers. Now, I was really hoping to see them in the polar finish, but the basalt finish looks gorgeous as well. Aesthetically, I really appreciate the attention to detail and the overall design of the towers. The speaker grills are robust and made of metal, and you don't have to worry about somebody poking or denting your drivers. Now, the one thing I'm not a big fan of is the color of the speaker grills. I would have loved to see maybe just a slightly different colored speaker grill. Maybe they could have went with a lighter gray or even a black, just something that would be a little bit different to provide some contrast so that they don't just disappear and not be noticed. Now, speaking of the speaker grills, I shared in the unboxing video that unlike other magnetic speaker grills, these actually have to be positioned correctly for the magnets to line up. Now, it almost feels like they're ever so slightly oblong in shape. Now, I discovered if you look at the rear of the speaker grills, if you align the Arendal logo at the top, they snap perfectly into place. Now, my ultimate preference is to keep the grills off so I can see the quad aluminum base drivers. But unfortunately, that's not happening now that we are grandparents. Having the inverted surrounds provides a super classy look on the front baffle. It almost looks like the woofers are kind of floating in midair. If you look close, you can see what they call a prism ridge structure, which adds stiffness to the drivers, resulting in lower distortion. One of my favorite aspects of the design is how they separate the front baffle from the speaker cabinet. The spacing and the curve on the horizontal and vertical plane give it additional depth and dimension. Now, if you've seen the rear of the other Arendal speakers and subwoofers, it's really no surprise to see the quality of the binding posts and even the thick metal jumper that connects them. Most speakers that I've owned in the past have cheap, thin metal jumpers. Now, due to the massive weight of 174 pounds or 79 kilograms, I appreciate the beefy feet and the stabilization bars. The speakers are made of HDF, which is high density fiberboard, which is much denser and heavier than your typical MDF that most speakers are made from. Now, as a result, the Tower 8s feel extremely sturdy and very well built. Adding the Pluck Plus feet is a nice touch as well. Not only do they protect your floors, but they also provide isolation and decoupling from the floor. I noticed on the Arendal website they're currently offering the upgraded Puck Pro free with the purchase of the Tower 8s. Looking at the website, you can adjust them up to 10 millimeters, which allows you to tilt the speaker slightly to better align the tweeter and mid-range to your listening position. Those upgraded feet cost $400, so that's just a nice bonus if you end up purchasing them in the near future. One thing I did find difficult with the standard Pluck Plus feet, it's challenging to remove the port plug by yourself as there isn't a lot of clearance under the speaker. I had Jessica remove them while I tilted the speakers forward. Arendal said the port plugs are easier to access with the upgraded Puck Pro feet because they're slightly higher. Now, for the most part, I think Arendal did an absolutely fantastic job on the design of the Tower 8s. I've been using the Tower 8s in my living room now for about the past 2 weeks. My living room is roughly 22 foot wide by 15 foot deep with 10-foot ceilings, but it also opens up to a kitchen and a breakfast nook, and that's about the same size, and also it opens up to the dining room. Needless to say, this is a pretty big area to fill with sound, and it's difficult to pressurize the room. Now, I personally use my systems probably 90% for home theater and maybe only about 10% for music. So for that reason, this review will mostly focus on how these performed for movies. Now, I'll also share my thoughts on how they sounded with 2-channel and even some concert movies. Just don't expect me to use audiophile descriptions like homogeneous timbral balance or rubbing artifacts. For the review, I have the Arendal 1528 Tower 8s connected to a Marantz Cinema 30 AVR. That's also paired with an Outlaw Audio 2220 monoblock amplifiers. There's 2 of those. So the monoblock amps provide 300 watts to each speaker into a 4 ohm load. The Tower 8s have a sensitivity of 89 dB with 2.83 volts at 1 meter. Now, the lower the sensitivity of your speakers and the lower the impedance, the harder the speaker is to drive. Now remember, you have to double the wattage in order to gain 3 decibels in volume. The Tower 8s have a recommended amplifier of up to 1,000 watts. So really, the more you can feed them, the more performance that you'll get out of them. So for my testing, I ran the Tower 8s as full range speakers with no subwoofer, as Arendal claims that they can be run as full range speakers. Now, there aren't too many speakers that I would consider truly full range speakers, as many will bottom out and distort when fed frequencies that they're not equipped to handle sufficiently. So I was curious to see how the Arendals would handle it being run full range. Now, the source for all movies and concerts was a custom script that I created on Kaleidescape. Now, if you're interested in the Kaleidescape script that I created, you can send me an email to youthman@obsessedhometheater.com and I'll send you the file. You can take that file, import that into your Kaleidescape account, and run that script. Now, of course, you're only going to be able to play the clips to the movies that you own in your library. Now, if you want to learn how to make your own custom Kaleidescape scripts, I'll leave a link to a tutorial that I made down in the description of this video. Now, unfortunately, the Center 8 Plus and the surrounds have been held up in customs, so I'll make a separate video on my experience with the full Arendal 5.1 setup. Also, Gene Delasala from Audioholics and Don Dunn are coming over next week. Gene's going to take some measurements of the Tower 8s, and he'll share them in a video on his channel, so be on the lookout for that. Also, Jay posted a review of the Tower 8s on his channel, which I'll also link in the description of this video. I'll end up watching his review after I post mine so that it doesn't influence my thoughts. So let's begin with some movies that I demoed. First up is A Quiet Place. If you don't have this, you need to buy it, especially if you have height speakers. My go-to scene is the red light emergency. In this scene, the Tower 8s provided tactile response as the monster stomped upstairs and then he begins to walk down the steps. Now, although the bass was very clean, without a subwoofer, you're missing on some of those really low frequencies that this scene provides. Now, I appreciate that the Tower 8s handled the dynamics from being very quiet to something big and explosive, like when the timer went off and the creature begins to destroy the room. For only having 2 speakers, I was really impressed at how immersive the Tower 8 sounded. Another great scene is Attack on Pearl Harbor in Midway. Now, this scene has a lot going on, with gunfire from the planes, to blazing fire, to bombs being dropped and exploding on the ship. Now, this scene has some really low frequencies as well that the Tower 8s are not able to reproduce. But once again, there was a significant amount of tactile response from them. I appreciated that the gunfire was really detailed without being harsh. Gran Turismo. Now, I have yet to watch this whole movie in its entirety, but what I have watched a ton is the GT Academy race scene. Now, when the lights turn green, the Tower H just exploded with bass. This brought a huge smile to my face, and honestly, I really wasn't expecting to feel as much bass as I did. The 8-inch aluminum drivers did an amazing job with the low frequencies from the engines of the cars and when they crossed the finish line. It was cool to hear the intricacies of the gravel as the cars rounded each corner. Now, I love demoing 2 minutes and 15 seconds scene from Top Gun Maverick. The Tower 8s effortlessly handled the LFE from the afterburners of the jets. Now, of course, it would have been nice to have a 5.1 or 7.1 or even a Dolby Atmos setup, but even just with 2 speakers, it was really immersive, and it was just captivating. In the first battle with the tree line in the movie Fury, this is one scene that the Tower 8s really could use the support from 1 or even more subwoofers. When the tank fires each round, typically my body feels each blast. I didn't really get that same impact from the Tower 8s. Now, the bass was clean, but the super tactile response that I'm used to feeling here in my theater room just wasn't present. Now, my guess is the scene has lower frequencies than the Tower 8s can produce with authority. The important thing to note, though, is the Tower 8s never bottomed out and they didn't sound muddy with each cannon fire or with the rumbling of the tanks. Another great scene was saving the miners in Dune. Now, this is a fantastic scene to demo. There's a ton of low frequencies in this scene. It's easy for inadequate subwoofers to struggle with this scene, especially when you crank them too loudly. But at reference volume, there was no sign of muddiness or bloated in the bass. It was just super clean, room-shaking bass. I also love the dynamics of this scene. There's a few places that the scene gets really quiet, and then a few seconds later, just this massive, explosive assault of musical score and the surround effects. Now, I could almost hear the Tower 8 saying, "Is that all you've got?" So I decided to really put them to the test. Interstellar's Enter the Wormhole. Now, I want to warn you, please be cautious with this scene. The last thing you want to do is fry your subwoofer or your speakers. It's absolutely insane. Now, I was running this scene pretty close to reference volume, which is really loud for my ears. Now, honestly, I expected the Tower 8s really to distort with those low frequencies, but I was pleasantly surprised. Not even a hint of distortion. There was one point in the scene, though, I thought I blew a speaker. It wasn't until I realized that one of the Outlaw audio amps went into protection mode and it actually shut off. I share that with you because if you plan on listening to these very loud, and especially if you're running them full range, depending on the capability of your amp, it could shut off or even damage it. Now, my guess is the speaker has an impedance dips that extend well below 4 ohms, which is really demanding on an amplifier. The Outlaw audio amp probably reached its impedance limit, and as a protective measure, it just shut down. Now, I'm not an engineer, so this is merely a guess on my part. But to say that I'm incredibly impressed with how well the Tower 8s handled each of these movie clips is an understatement. It appears that Arendal is using high output, high quality components in these speakers. But that's to be expected from a pair of speakers costing $9,500 US. Now, with each scene, dialogue was clear and it was really nicely anchored to the screen, even running without a center channel. At no point did I feel like I was struggling to hear dialogue. They did an amazing job handling the subtle nuances like distant sounds and different effects throughout the movies. Now, in my Kaleidescape script, I also have some concerts. One new one that I purchased after hearing Matt Trinkline's demo in Soundroom 4 at Cedia was Radioactive from Imagine Dragons' Smoke and Mirrors Live. The drum line in this song is powerful. And the best way I can describe the bass from the Tower 8s was it was really smooth and very controlled. It's not the best concert for vocals, but it's great if you want just to crank it up and jam. The Greatest Showman is more of a musical than a concert, but it's also got some fantastic scores as well as some vocal performances. From now on, as the piano is played delicately at the beginning, the Tower 8s just provided this intimate experience that captured and expressed his emotions of sadness and regret. The Tower 8s were able to pick up on the subtle nuances of Hugh Jackman's breath and quivering voice. But then as the score began to build and the drums kicked in, I just found myself increasing the volume more and more. Just such a powerful song, and the Tower 8s delivered it with beauty and with grace. I really enjoyed listening to Sting's Every Breath You Take from Live at the Olympia Paris. You've got this strong bass line mixed with a thick sound of electric guitar, and you also have the audience yelling and clapping to the rhythm. And the Tower 8s just do a great job separating each one of those pieces, the musical instruments, while putting his voice front and center of the screen. Now, in addition to movies and concerts, I also listen to a variety of music. Now, I don't have anything fancy, just using Spotify Premium through AirPlay into the Marantz Cinema 30. The Sound of Silence from Jeff Castellucci seems perfect for the Tower 8s. His voice is just so deep, along with the added low frequencies from the music. Now, when those low notes hit, you feel them. The bass from the Tower 8s are just super smooth, and they just really capture the texture in his voice. Liberty by Annette Askvik was a song that the Tower 8s could really benefit from having a subwoofer. I noticed the first note that is played is really soft on the Tower 8s. You can hear it, but it's more reserved than I'm used to hearing it in my theater room. Now, typically that's a very prominent note that can be felt in this room with my JTR system. My guess, this is just another frequency that's lower than what the Tower 8s can play with authority. The same thing with Hey Now from London Grammar. The dual bass notes are typically felt. Now, these were faint as well on the Tower 8s. In Keith Don't Go, I really enjoyed the richness of the guitar. You can hear every finger as it just plucks the strings and the subtle taps of the guitar. Another song that sticks out is Run to You by Leah Michelle. Now, this was just straight up beautiful. I love her voice, and it was just so pure and so delicate on the Tower 8s. The piano was soft and just super melodic. Now, overall, the Tower 8s are quite impressive. They provide an immersive sound. They have power, authority, yet they can handle and deliver intricate details without sounding harsh or bright. Now, although the Tower 8s can be used as full-range speakers, I still feel that every system can benefit from having one or even better, multiple subwoofers. You'll still get that mid-bass slam from the Towers, but it'll be much less stress on your amp or your AVR, and it'll help open up the mid-range as well. Now, my living room is large, so I'm curious how the Tower 8s are going to sound in a smaller dedicated theater room like this one. This theater room is only 13 feet wide by 19 feet deep, and I've got 10-foot ceilings, but it's acoustically treated. Now, these front seats are going to be really close to the towers, so I might have to move to the rear seats to put enough distance between me and the speakers. I also want to try the Tower 8s out with the Arendal 1V subwoofer. I have a feeling that's going to provide the bottom end and some of the low tactile response that I felt was missing in some of the movies and music that I listened to. So what are the downsides of the Tower 8s? Well, at $9,500, they aren't cheap, and they won't fit everybody's budget. But I've also heard plenty of speakers at audio shows that cost twice as much, or even more than that I didn't enjoy as much as these. Now, at 174 pounds, they're ridiculously heavy. Once you get them unboxed and in place, you'll think twice about moving to a new home. And at 89 dB, they aren't super efficient, so you'll want to invest in a quality amplifier with probably a minimum of 200 watts per channel, but even more if you can get it. Now, I'll be borrowing a pair of Buckeye amplifiers with even more power, so I'm curious to try them out with the Tower 8s. Now, because of their height, if you've got a small room and maybe you've got to sit close, they might not sound as good as they could. They're also deep and they require a lot of floor space. It's also recommended that you keep them at least 12 inches from the wall, and that might place them too far out into your room. Other than those few things, I really don't have any reservations recommending the Tower 8s. I'm really curious to see what Gene and Don's thoughts are when they get to come over next week. Maybe we'll bring them into this theater room and really just see how they sound compared to my living room, which isn't acoustically treated. Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the new 1528 series and the Tower 8s. I'll leave a link to that entire series down in the description below. Now, I'll be making more videos on the 1528 series as soon as they get released from customs, so make sure you stay tuned to the channel. Well, I hope you guys have an incredible week. God bless, and we'll catch you in the next video.